No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Well, people should be aware that there's a co-authored by Mike Arduser new paper out. So, Mike, why don't you talk a little bit about that?
It's basically, broadly speaking, it addresses all the green halictines, the algochlorines, in the greater Midwest, and then touches on some extraliminal questions about certain species in that group. But it basically changes some names. I mean, Algochloropsis metallica fulgida is now officially Algochloropsis viridula. And there's ample images and keys in the publication. And Zach Portman did all the heavy lifting, and I kind of got carried along, so that's very fortunate. But it's open access in Zoo Keys, and if you're interested in the green halictines in the Midwest, this is probably worth looking into. Sumptuosa, also Algochloropsis sumptuosa, got split into east and west. So the one on where you guys are, east of the mountains, is Sumptuosa, but the one in the Midwest and further west, out into the Great Plains, is Humoralis. And these are all existing names that had been synonymized by previous authors. And Zach dug up all the types, and we kind of looked at everything, and that's the outcome. And Algochloropsis in general, it's a huge genus. Once you get down to Mexico and Central America and South America, there are over 100 species, and no one's ever tackled the genus at the genus level. So there's still a lot of work to be done with that group.
Yeah. I remember looking through a bunch of Texas stuff and going like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do with this?
There are some big question marks. Yeah, we didn't have enough material to really address it. Had to stop somewhere. So we stopped with the Midwest.
So yeah, because where do you stop, really?
Yeah.
And so updates of databases, and we'll have to update the guides too. And we have new species, just all of a sudden.
New names
to our lists.
Yeah.
All right. So I will share my screen, and we'll jump to the Anthidium guide. We're into the females. I want to say that we discussed Manichatum and its bumpy rim.
We did.
But did we? Do that?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so. Yeah.
All right, and then we went down to oblongatum, and I'm not sure, but I believe in the males at least we saw the pronotal lobe, really interesting.
That's how we finished up with that
thing. Let me get my screen thing set up here, and that's where we stopped. And right now, I think on screen you can see, just in contrast with Manichatum, here's what most of the Anthidium rims of the Clypeus look like, which is basically just more or less straight across and not the kind of architecture. So Manichatum, it sort of projects out, and there's bumps like a pie crust all the way around. And in the others, it's pretty much plain and straight across. So we'll go to Mike's key now. And see, I have Anthidium here set up, and I think, yeah, I've taken it down to, so we talked about Manichatum, straight line, Clypeus. Here we have oblongatum. We looked at the nice high line edging, or the lamella, to our lamella around the pronotal lobe, which I believe is unique only to oblongatum, and at least in our eastern species. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Would you mind clicking the X on the navigation and on the update now so we can get the maximum view here?
So back here?
No. On your screen there, but like closing the bar on the left and the yellow bar on the top.
Oh, I see. And how do I close this bar?
I don't know, but the one on the left, you can just hit the X under the navigation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Claire. Okay, so now we get to, so those both have their unique, both not native species. So that makes sense that it would have something that the native species don't. And then we get down to this couplet where we look at tenuiflorae and everything else native. And while I'm teeing up my female tenuiflorae, Mike, do you want to talk about the differences there?
Well,
And
yeah, that's
maybe a little bit about the species too.
yeah, that's primarily a northwestern North American species, and it had never been recorded east of I don't know 100 meridian or even further than that until fairly recently, and there was a specimen from Isle Royale, and maybe more than one. Maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also been found recently in northwestern Minnesota. So, and again, this is a very far north species, and most of us will never see it. But, you know, it could be over into Maine, could be in even northern New York. Who knows? Those mountain boreal type things that could be there. So,
Yeah. And there is a odd distributional pattern, at least a little bit, of Western Rocky specimens arching over
yep,
and then jumping above the Great Lakes.
completely.
And so Isle Royale is basically Canadian fauna and landmass. It's much closer to that than it is certainly to Michigan. We should give it back to Canada, but at least
No.
the bees want to go there. But we would not have a as much reason to go there and look at these weird things. I'm looking at, for example, Diphoria mara, which is this really cool, weird, all black-haired Diphoria, which does the same thing, kind of the same distributional pattern.
So does Osmia subastralis. It's a significant list. Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And,
So go ahead.
And yeah, and there are a lot of plants that have that same geographic pattern. Many of them considered disjuncts, but maybe we've never collected enough between the Great Lakes and Alberta and British Columbia to maybe fill in those gaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
Canadians
Well, there just continues to be lots and lots of weird disjunct population that's very difficult in bees in the East, where there has been a fair amount of collecting with main stem populations in the Midwest, just over and over again. That makes you wonder what the heck we're looking at, residual ones or just bad collecting in between.
Yeah.
So that whole axis of Tennessee, Kentucky, Southern Ohio, and actually even still probably a fair amount of Ohio, certainly West Virginia, are not very well collected, particularly Kentucky and Tennessee, compared to Illinois. And that's where, and then even in Illinois, Mike, you have been working with people where you're finding a bunch of new things, even though they had the famous Wally LaBerge and predecessors, Robertson, collecting the heck out of it.
But
so it just begs that for more work and a lot of head scratching over insect apocalypse and bee decline kinds of numbers when we can find these pockets that no one knew about. Okay, so is this the only species in our group that has all black on the head, except for these dots up here on the Clypeus and paraocular area?
I think so, unless there's an aberrant specimen here or there. But I think that's one thing about this species. It's a lot blacker overall than the rest of our natives in the East.
Yeah, I'll do. We'll turn it around here so we can see the back a little bit and just the vibe on it. But again, in the group, there's some, unlike a lot of other things, these have some pretty good, strong characters to play with.
Sam, Was this collected from this species on Isle Royale from a number of different sites or just one? Do you remember?
I think that was more than one site. This, I'm looking at whether this one was from Isle Royale or Badlands stuff. No, this was Isle Royale again. So yeah, this was this gal who was there just helping out the Park Service, and she did Shelby Wilson. She did a great job and found all kinds of rare things and didn't have any pins. Like I got some of these. This one was on a pin with sewing needles, and I had a couple that were actually on cotter pins. So anyway, see, dedication for sure. But you can see the yeah, almost completely. I'd say maybe completely. Looks like a little bit on the tegula, yellow, thorax, and then reduced markings back there too. So yeah, and I don't think there's been much other work other than Shelby's. I mean, she just was an intern and did a little bit. I just can't imagine that there's not a whole bunch of other cool Andrina, for example, and things that might be there.
You got to wonder.
Yeah. I think they need to pay you to go there, Mike.
I don't even think they need to pay me.
Yeah.
I've been there several times, but I've never collected there. So.
Oh, okay. I can't believe that you've been there and weren't collecting.
It was a long time ago.
Okay.
Pre-B.
Got it. All right. So let's go back to here. So another relatively easy one to take care of. So then the rest have at least some maculations on the clypeus, and whether the parocular area is maculated or not is up for grabs. And you have a note here that the rest are fully eastern species, with porterae being a western one, right? Is that what?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Kansas, Nebraska, okay. Oklahoma, but no records east of those Great Plains states. But these are strong bees that can disperse great distances, I would imagine. So that's why it's in the key. We think it might show up in Arkansas or Missouri or Iowa at some point.
Yeah. So I don't have maculosum, but I do have maculifrons and porterae here to look at. So although the porterae, no, that looks like a female. So we can take an inspection there. Do you have anything you want to talk about maculosum?
I just, at the last moment, I put it in the key just because, well, maybe it's in Louisiana or Western Arkansas. No records of it. But it's in Texas, in East Texas. So,
yeah.
Just want to put it in there just in case.
So I'm going to bring up on deck maculifrons, and I can't quite remember its distribution. This one's from Florida. Is this one of the ones that are largely restricted to Florida?
No, it's in southern Missouri. Where else of it? I think as far as northernmost records, I think southern Missouri is it, and southern Illinois. But I don't think there are any records from up in the Great Lakes region. I couldn't find any. So it's
okay.
Lower Midwest, and then I don't know on the East Coast how far it gets up. Do you have any Maryland records?
I don't have any certainly up in Maryland, and I don't think it. I want to say it may only reach up. Well, we can do a quick dive into that here. Let's go to the global mapper and put that in. Always worth checking out. Let's see, was it maculifrons what we were looking at?
Yeah, yep, maculifrons.
Too many M1s. Oh yeah, quite extensive numbers. Oh yeah, it's right. This comes right up. So I'm of course obviously interested in Maryland. It comes right up to Maryland. I believe that's not in Maryland. Yeah. So that's in Dahlgren, which is an Air Force base. This was just happened this past year, and you can see that we just identified it. a little while ago, but that's literally right across the river
Wow.
from Maryland. So it should be in Maryland, probably is in Maryland, given these kinds of patterns. But yeah, you can see this distribution up here. Looks like West Virginia. Yep. John Asher identifies it. And then south. And then there's, again, this hiatus here
Yep. Yep.
but this is your big uncollected area. That's probably just Tennessee. Yeah, seeing this as found in Tennessee. But this whole area, like through here, Cumberland Plateau, southern hills in Indiana and Iowa, or Illinois, and throughout Tennessee and Kentucky. Wow, lots to figure out.
Yeah, and in the Midwest, we found it almost exclusively at legumes.
Makes sense. A lot of them are legume lovers, that's for sure. Okay, so let's check out here when we look at the characters. I've got a shot here, I think teed up of T6, so black versus spotted for porterae. Let's see if we can center that. Here we go. Also pretty reduced and pretty white colored.
Yeah.
I think that's indicative of the species. It's usually a light white, off-white color, right?
Yep. Yep.
So nothing there. And then our couplet, Mike indicates that porterae does have maculations in that segment.
Yeah, big ones.
And then, Mike, I'm going to switch to the Clypeus, and you had, I think, several Clypeal things to talk about here.
Yeah, in a number of Anthidium females, and I think it's probably over 8, 9, 10 at least, in terms of all of the New World. A number of these females have hairs on the Clypeus that are curved or hooked or wavy. They're not straight, and there's Manichatum is like that. It's not native, but it has kind of hooked hairs. And porterae females have, I would just call them wavy hairs, but it's quite obvious they're not straight. And if you compare porterae with, maculifrons or some of the other species we've been talking about, there's a difference in the hairs on the Clypeus. The problem is they wear away, and as the bee ages. So sometimes it's not a useful character.
Yeah, and this is does appear to be a little bit warm, but also is at the bad angle to look for those things. We'll look at them from the side, and I've got a porterae, and it does have, I could see without even looking at the microscope, the hair, so that'll be a good indicator. But I believe you also talked about these, what would you call them, Clypeal angles or teeth, as a difference between the two? Mistaken?
Well, it's the labrum.
Oh, it's the labrum.
Which is often hidden. But sometimes in porterae, these tubercles are big enough. They often show up without having the mandible spread. Not always, but they're. Right. I mean, they're not little bumps. These are things that stick up.
Okay, well, we'll pull up porterae and see if we can find the tubercles. The lack of tubercles are not going to be particularly obvious on this other one, but let's take maculifrons and turn it to the side and see if we can spot the hairs, the straight hair situation on this specimen, which does seem to be a bit worn. At least I'm not seeing initially a lot of hair there. Well, I guess.
Yeah, that's good enough.
You can see, yeah. I'll bring it into the center there. But now we'll flip to the other one, and yeah, there's nothing there that you would call certainly wavy, and not even really angled or curved. So let's look at our alternative species, quite different. And I want to make sure I put these tags back on. Porterae coming up. We'll look at the hairs off to the side first. Oops. Get it straightened and bring up the level.
Getting there.
Might have to. I think
I mean,
part of the problem is it's in the middle. So we're looking at the side here.
when the middle's
and-
worn away, okay.
Yeah. Well, and but I think you can see some
Yeah.
of the curved hairs in the middle there
Yeah, that's
amidst
good. Yeah,
all
that's
that.
good. That's good.
I'll, just let me try and brighten this image just a bit. Maybe spin it a little bit too. Oop, maybe too much. So let's get that back up. So you can start seeing
That's good.
these spins there, he's turning, and because we're also seeing this through the hair on the lateral sides. Let's see if we can get this a bit better. What am I even looking at here? Try and pull this all the way up. So yeah, you can see curved hairs in there.
Yeah, it's not dramatic, but yeah, I mean, it's, they're clearly not, there might be a few straight ones there, but, so it's a subtle thing, but if it's a fresh specimen, you can see it pretty clearly.
Yep.
And there are other bees and other groups that also have non-straight hairs on the clypeus or sometimes other parts of the face. And the word is that these are usually involved with pollen collection, but I have never seen any pollen on the face of any porterae, so I'm not sure what to make of that.
I'm going to bring the light back down, but we're going to look at T6, which has maculations on them.
You can see it from here. Two very big spots, and all the specimens I've seen in the Great Plains look like that. It's like they're never greatly reduced. They're always quite large and conspicuous.
Yeah, like we've talked about before on these groups, like the face pattern and the size, shape, and cutouts and patterns on the abdomen are often all you would need for an ID guide. So there's something for someone to do, is to create that ID guide. So my thought is, since we have some time, is to we could talk about and show Pseudoanthidium nanum as a contrast, and Paranthidium jugatorium is native, the other one's not native, as a contrast, and then go into Anthidiellum if we wanted to. How does that sound?
Yep, sounds good.
Right, let's pull the Pseudoanthidium nanum, and I've got that up on Discover Life. So this is a species. Let's just see. Here we are on maculifrons, or what the latest is in terms of its distribution. So My impression is it like super junky areas, like behind car distributors and just like in industrial sites in downtown Baltimore and New York City. And it seems to be on clovery things, I'll say. All right, so and it's very small.
Yeah, that's one of the hallmarks. It
And it
had
would-
the females have usually five teeth, which immediately makes you think of Anthidium,
Yeah,
which has even more. But
it would key to that.
yes, it would. It would probably key to Anthidium in most guides and most keys, including Mitchell.
Wow.
But it's very tiny, 5-6 millimeters generally, and like I said,
yeah,
it's in urban areas. We haven't found it in St. Louis, despite a lot of looking. I don't know where that dot is.
Yeah, let's see. Might be a state. Yeah, it's Illinois, so
Yeah,
Chicago probably has
yeah.
it. And so it's spread pretty quickly since its discovery, which I want to say was around 2010 or so, in the New York, DC axis. I think, again, just because people were looking. And now if we look at numbers of records, we're seeing like we've collected 19 and there's several other locations, but looks like, is this a legit one? Is that an Oregon?
Good question.
Yeah. So John has indicated that someone in Oregon has seen it, in Minnesota. So it should be expected pretty much anywhere, I would guess. I don't know what its southern limits are going to be, but it certainly loved the crappy places.
Yeah, Detroit, Chicago. I've seen specimens from Detroit, Chicago, I think Cleveland. There was a paper Zach Portman and a bunch of other people were involved with a couple of years ago in the Great Lakes Entomologist that has extensive images and a lot of descriptions of this species, and it covers it in great detail. So that and that's open access. So
yeah, so it's very tiny, very roundy looking orange legs, and we take a look on the face. This is another facial thing here, and then we'll look at the discover life, but the characteristics for telling it from Anthidium, because it does have a fair number of teeth. I don't know if it's always exactly 5, which would be interesting. But it's an Anthidium lookalike. It does have a all black Clypeus here. I believe this is a female. Is it a female? But now there may be a better way now that people are splitting it apart, but when we put this into the genera guide, which I'm going to jump to here, Pseudoanthidium versus Anthidium, they mostly are asking people to look at the rims of the tergites and the differences between that on the rims of Anthidiums, that we'll try and pull one to look at this too, the depressed part of the rim. So for people who don't hang out on tergites very often, and this is confusing when you first get into it. If you, we'll show a picture, it's not greatly depressed. So usually you have the segment T2, let's say, and along the rim, you have different characteristics. And if you look closely at some point, maybe it depends on the species, anywhere from, I'd say, a quarter to a third of the way back will be a slight change in elevation that is demarked by a visible line that shows the depressed rim is slightly, so that would be along the rim, be slightly lower, and the rest of the segment is higher. Mike, you can probably articulate that better than I can, but I'll try.
No, yeah, and it's often not dramatic, but it's usually, it usually stands out if it's present. Something else about Pseudoanthidium nanum, the front femur in the females, and I think maybe the males, I'm not sure, it's angulate at the base. And in all the Anthidiums that I've ever seen, it's rounded. And so...
that might be a good one. Right, we'll take a look here. Go ahead.
And it's not, angulate like a sharp point, but it's definitely not rounded. And that seems to be a pretty good character. The other thing is that this group, Pseudoanthidium, in the old world, has a bunch of species, and and they all, I think it's a difficult group, and so who knows? There may be another one or two that gets introduced. So, I mean, it just seems to keep happening every year. New things keep popping into this world from the old world, and there seems no end to it.
And I think they're tricky to tell apart.
Oh, totally. Yes. Well, that's good.
Okay, so this area right here should be the depressed rim. And at least I see no other things. And theoretically, so T2 and 3, pits uniform throughout the central portion of the abdomen, no noticeable shift in size or spacing towards the rim. Rim area often with no discernible depression other than the thin unpitted ribbon. Okay, that's what we're looking at. So lining the very edge of the rim. So if we go back here, this area is what they're talking about. And I think what they're indicating is that normally there, and we'll switch back to an Anthidium, that there should be an area further back here that is depressed, but this is just uniform pits right to the edge. And I'm gonna switch to a Anthidium. Let's see if I have a good one to look at here to see how this appears in contrast. Both these up at the same time. Okay, so I think that's T3. Let's go just to T2 here. Yeah, so here is, I think, so this is the depressed area. So this is defined, this is throughout of the bee world. So you have this area where there's a slight elevational change. You can see by the reflection here, and also right here, indicating this would be the depressed area. And not sure if we're looking, are we looking at a rim here, or is this the under, this is
that's the base. Yeah, it's the base of T3. Yeah, so
T3, often not exposed like this, has been pulled out a little bit, and you can see T3. So there would be the actual rim. So we don't have that light colored rim. We do have an actual depressed area here defined by an edge, and you can see the same edge here. And then let's see what else. I don't know where I think I got this from Michener's book, but so if we're looking at Anthidium, pits on the depressed rim smaller, more closely spaced. That was not super noticeable, I have to say. If we're looking at one, I guess probably not, but it's not a huge difference. So if we look at these two depressed rims, so they're supposed to be more closely spaced here on the depressed rim and smaller than in the basal area. So I think, yeah, if one were inspecting this closely, you could say it, but it's pretty subtle.
Yeah.
In this specimen. So we'll go back and look at Mike's leg thing. Subantennal sutures clearly arch outward in Pseudoanthidium, and the subantennal sutures straight or nearly so. Problem, hard to see subantennal sutures often from hairs to just glare, but we'll see if we can see that. and this is small. These are going to be smaller than even oblongatum, which is probably our smallest Anthidium. And it's, I would say, getting to be less rare. It should be on everyone's plate to look for in these collections. All right, so let's go back to here, and we'll look at the, so we're looking at Anthidium here, but I have the Pseudoanthidium too. So you say there's a leg difference on
Yeah,
the front leg, Mike?
the base of the front femur, and sometimes the way it, they're positioned, it might be hard to see.
Yeah.
But the base of the front femur ventrally is rounded in the Anthidium, all the Anthidiums, and in Pseudoanthidium, it's angulate.
So this should be the front femur here.
Sure,
unless
it looks
I'm
like it.
confusing things. And
Yeah.
so are you talking about here?
Yeah.
Okay. So just essentially a simple curve. And,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Simple curve. Yeah.
All right. So now go to the same specimen we were looking at for Pseudoanthidium, to drop the O. And maybe needs to be repositioned, but let's take a quick look here. Let me try and reposition it. Oh, I wonder if we can see it across the way like we did the other one.
Well, that's not right.
Yeah, it looks. Oh, wait. That's because I've inadvertently switched back to the other specimen. Definitely, we're not going to win Academy Awards for our movie chatter and photography here. All right.
Oh boy, it's
pretty darn busy in there.
It is.
We may punt on this for the moment. But visually, I think the small size should be the main alert, and then you can, and really, it's kind of a picture book thing too. So we'll try and find some of these more clear pictures.
Any tiny Anthidiine with 5 or 6 teeth is going to be that.
Yeah.
It really it's because Stelis, some of which are very small, also they don't have 5 or 6 teeth. And then another one, Anthidiellum, which we're going to look at, I think, here shortly. They're also small, but they have basically no teeth and a square mandible, and so pretty straightforward, really.
Okay, before we jump into Anthidiellum, let me just do one of the other things that can get mixed up in here in this clade of lookalikes, which can also include if you get a Stelis louisiae, it has a visual feeling. We talked about this while you were gone, Mike. Feeling that is it is an Anthidiine, I believe, but that is different. So here is a specimen, and we're going to, well, you might want to talk about it. I'll try and get the mid leg shot set up if I can, which is always tricky, the scoop-like aspect of it. Am I looking at a front leg or a...
It looks like a front leg.
That's front leg.
Who are we looking at, Sam?
This is Paranthidium jugatorium. Looking for something that has a leg maybe sticking out. So, Mike, you want to talk about the life history while I'm trying to find this character? The bad boys.
Well, this is a bee I have only collected once.
Oh, really?
There are no records from Missouri, and there's an old publication of Mitch's that mentions this in Missouri and that he found nests, but it turns out that that's not what it was. It was Dianthidium, and he clarified that in a later publication. So I don't know that much about this bee in terms of its occurrence and its ecology and where it shows up. The other thing about it is that there are 3 additional subspecies described for this bee, and it varies in terms of coloration and maculations. It's, based on the literature, this thing varies like crazy. And but it does have 4 teeth, 4 mandibular teeth, the females, and the pronotal lobe is also lamellate, but there's no omalis. There's no sharp edge to the anterior part of the mesopleura.
So I think I have. Let me just pull up the guide thing here.
Do you find this on the East Coast?
I actually have only collected one in Maryland, and it's a specialist here on woodland sunflower. Not all the sunflowers, just woodland apparently.
Huh.
Sunflowers, and it was just on a mountain road in Western Maryland, and I saw the plant, and I'm like, okay, this should have Paranthidium on them, even though there were no records. And it seems to be that the axis for the distribution is running through the southern Appalachian, but like more the hill country and plateau and Ridge and Valley, which this was, rather like Cumberland Plateau, rather than so much the super tall mountains that have northern aspects to them. But it does seem to be specialized on just that woodland sunflower. There's a couple species, but
that's what I found it on in Arkansas, actually. If my
you did?
If my plant ID was right, it was definitely Helianthus.
Yeah. Well, and there tends to be an earlier blooming Helianthus, so the woodland sunflower, and they call it woodland sunflower, I think, for a pretty good reason, which is that you see it along roads and things in the edges of these dry forest areas.
Nancy says that she found one in Virginia on a larger sunflower, thinks it might have been sunchoke, and has a photo.
Oh wow. But that would be interesting, because sunchokes, that would be Helianthus, tuberosa or Jerusalem artichoke. So here, when we grow them, and I have them all over my house, those are very, very late in the year. And the Paranthidium record that I had was, I think, I was out on the 4th of July weekend.
Wow.
So worthy of inspection, and maybe there's more than we know going on. So we're going to look now. I think I've got this queued up, and it looks like the front and the middle have no spine on it on the thing, and it has got this weird round plate. That one may only be on the middle one. So okay, so just a little bit. So this is the middle leg here, and then you can see something similar because the front leg's also visible, but there's no tibial spurs, I believe, if I have that right. But it has this weird big roundy plate right there, which I think might be a little bit scooped out if we looked at it in a different direction. But it also has that whole same pattern of Stilus Louisiae, of Anthidium, Anthidiellum in particular, look and feel on the top. But this is the character. This is why, I guess, probably one of maybe more than one reason why it kicks out. Let's go back here. So so here's this broad projection with a round tip, and beyond this projection is a hairless scoop, shining in scoop-like area. This one's often hard to find. Margin tip of mandible with an oblique angle to outer margin. So yeah, that mandibles look weird, and we can show them here in a second. So behind, I'm pointing at this, behind here should be this. I think you have to actually turn it over. Let me see if I can do that. Anything else to add on this one, Mike, that we should be looking at?
Well, Paranthidium have very, very tiny ocelli compared to most of the other Anthidiines. I mean, they're smaller. There's the diameter of the ocelli is smaller than the antennal sockets, which is pretty weird.
This may be one of these things that is going to be more trouble than it's worth to find, but I think we might be looking at the area right here in this area. Yeah, this should be it. A little bit difficult. So we're looking from underneath. Here's this half circular, and here's this scooped out hollow bare area behind it. Not easy to see or define. So be aware that if you're collecting off of sunflowers, woodland sunflowers, that you should check this out. I believe if we go back, we'll see some of these characters Mike was talking about, that will give you a more gestalt look. Let's see if I can change this now to the head. So I'm not as, what of these patterns here of the yellow are truly characteristic of the eastern one or not is hard to say, but it might, it might be that this pattern,
that's
yellow,
the ones I had
across the top here. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, my specimens from Arkansas don't have those stripes on the scutum. And
these thin ones here.
Yeah, and there's no maculation on the fronds. Again, that
this thing is gone.
Yeah, that's gone. That's one of the things about Anthidiines is that color is so engaging that your eye is drawn to it, and sometimes that leads you to make snap judgments, which you later regret,
oh my God!
which I've done.
And then nomata are crazy.
Well, that's even worse.
Yeah. Oh, look at this. What is this?
That's the antenna cleaner.
Oh, that's the antennal scraper.
Yeah.
And is this what was this thing that you call it again?
The malar spine.
Malar spine, right?
Yeah. Which is always worth looking at. I think it's made more useful than we give it credit for.
I think of you as Mr. Malar Spine. Be on your headstone. He made people aware of the Malar spine. All right, so yeah, these are pretty darn small. They're not much bigger than some of the, they're not even 2 pits wide, these ocelli. That's interesting. We can tell stories about big ocelli, right? They're useful when it's nocturnal, but what do you say about small ones? And that's not, I mean, the only other species that I can think of where ocelli play even a size that on the small side play a bit is Pennsylvanicus, versus Oricomis.
Mm-hmm.
So Pennsylvanicus have really noticeably smaller ocelli. And I'm like, oh, yeah. If I have any questions, I'm like, yep. Anything else? So I guess the yellow thing is, problematic. We can look at the mandibles here in a second. I'm going to tilt this up.
So I think the fact
See
that
them.
that both of us have only seen that bee collected it once or twice, that I think it's safe to say it's a rare species. That's in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah, although I was in southern Ohio, so that's definitely hill country. There was a Forest Service site that was doing, we had worked with the Forest Service on using basically stadium cups with glycol in it. And they got a buttload of
Wow. Wow.
Pseudoanthidium there. There's been a
Wow.
couple other places.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And John Asher was telling me about a location that was, I want to call it an arboretum, that had planted a lot of woodland sunflower, and they had these bees buzzing all over the place. So
Well,
this might be another
local.
circumstance like we
Local.
see, yeah, that where if people started planting this plant more, that it may colonize if it's in the area.
Oh,
Like,
that's a good
see-
shot of mandible.
yeah, we see that with heuchera and things. So I think this oblique angle here is what they were talking about as strongly indicative, but certainly not. So this would be, the closer ones would be Anthidium and not really, and Anthidiellum also, they would be different in shape. So there's enough here, but I think the main thing would be to be suspicious of things collected from sunflowers. And Nancy, I'd be interested in that specimen that you had, or the picture, and we could take a look at that and see how that pans out. Because this seems, if it is on Jerusalem artichoke, it would be late in the year. So what do we got for time? Do we have time to throw up some Anthidiellums?
There is 7 minutes left.
Okay.
1:53.
Maybe there's really, Mike, unless you disabuse me, there should just be the 2 species that we have to talk about and a couple color things in the notatum crowd. I'll tee one up.
Yeah, this is another Anthidiellum is another example of an Anthidiine with multiple described subspecies. I even forget how many there are, and I don't know how many John has recognized in his list. But I think there are multiple species. They're not subspecies. And if you look in the east, notatum and boreale historically being a subspecies that Charles Robertson described, they're different, and there's no overlap. They're sympatric mostly, so I consider them 2 separate species, and it's not published anywhere. But I mean, just start looking at them, and they're males and females both. The genitalia are different, punctures are different. I mean, they're very different species. At least in the Midwest,
Mike, I have a key. I mean, it's probably updated since there's just the 2, but it's from October 6, 2018 of yours.
Yep.
Is that the copy that everyone should work from?
It's probably good enough, yeah, because I think it's been some time since I noticed those differences, and I think that should work.
Okay, so maybe we can't in the remaining minutes really cover all of this here, but and then we because there's also Perplexum, which is not covered in Mike's guide, but is a deep
Floridian.
south species
Yeah.
on the East Coast. But just to show, so first of all, this pattern, which is out of focus here, is really indicative in my mind of Anthidiellum.
Yep.
And it's just like, I don't have to see anymore. It's also super small. So it'd be the same size as Pseudoanthidium, but obviously has different characters. And the primary one is this lamellate shelf or shelf-like projection of the scutellum. And so again, when you're starting out, you don't have a context, but because sometimes you can look at Anthidiums and say, oh, well, is that projecting? Because it is a little sticky outy, but this is way, way out here.
Well, it's like an awning, you
Yeah.
know, and yeah, it's hard to
That's a good
miss.
description. I'll see if I can spin it a little to the side here, but tiny, very bee-like. I think of them as pea family lovers. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's true for all of them. Here we are again at the edge there in the deep south. I'll just show it very quickly. Is another species, Perplexum. I don't have boreale here. It's a little bit bigger, but in the south, the notatums can have the same coloration. So this coloration is often the coloration of species from the deep south, of several, anything that's a yellowish, has yellow maculations, often brings in, and this is very true of wasp species too, brings in this ochre color more and more as you go to the deep south, or can, particularly down to Florida. And anything that has bright shiny green can become purple and blue in coloration. But also, and Perplexum has this really dark wing. So I think rather than try and too quickly explore this, just to point out some vibe right now, and then maybe we'll come back and do a good job on this next time and get into Dianthidium to Tracusa, and just to kind of continue with the colorful group.
That sounds good.
So anything else to add on this group? So we want to talk about the life history, which is kind of unique in terms of nesting, at least.
I'm drawing a blank on that one off the top of my head.
Oh, the little weird glued together pebble nests.
Above, yeah, on sticks and twigs. Yeah. Sorry. I don't know if there are any photos of that on Discover Life, but it's a curious, reproductive strategy. They, I won't say glue, but they use resin to assemble these globose cells that are above ground and stuck to twigs and sometimes stones, other things. And they aren't alone in that. There's some other Anthidians that do that, but it's just a different way of, compared to andrenids or halictids, it's an unusual way of nesting.
Yep. Well, I think that might be a good stopping place. If anyone has questions or anyone else has other observations, that would be great to hear.
No questions, but Nancy said that she got the photos visiting Asclepius tuberosa and posted a video on Facebook.
Oh.
So
Okay.
I assume you mean in like the BIML Facebook group, maybe, Nancy?
Well, Asclepius tuberosa changes the, I heard tuberosa and I was thinking Helianthus tuberosa.
Well, yeah, the first thing the first comment said sunchoke.
Okay.
Parenthetical Jerusalem artichoke.
Okay. Yeah, because that's so late in the year in terms of its bloom that a lot of these things are gone. I would think Paranthidium would be gone. But yeah, so we'll take a look and see what's to see.
Okay.
All right.
Everybody have a great holiday.
Yeah, ditto.
Yeah.
Thanks, Claire and Mike, for all of that.
And we'll be back next week.
Okay.
Okay. All right. See y'all.
More colorful bees. Oh, Mike, hang on for 1 second.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so